A leader's image these days can be as important as the issues he or she stands for. And the backroom boys and or girls are aware that when they're pitching a candidate, they're selling the sizzle as well as the steak. The race for the Liberal leadership is no exception. Pat Adams is the president of Tricom Communications Limited, a media consulting firm. She is with us in our Toronto studios. And in Ottawa, David McNaughton, president of Public Affairs International and chairman of the Fundraising and Strategy Committee for the Donald Johnson campaign. Good morning to you both.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Can we start with you, Pat Adams, and have your thumbnail sketches of the images that the 6 candidates are presenting to the public as we've seen it so far?
All right, let's start with Mr. Turner, since he seems to be the front lead. He has a movie star appearance, but I cast him in the role of the Iceman Cometh. I always have a feeling if you turn him around, you'll find that there's a little key that winds him up. Very cold man.
Cold, no warmth, and he doesn't look spontaneous.
That's right. Mr. Chrétien, on the other hand, is very spontaneous. He has a good sense of humor. He's a very warm, feeling man. That he expresses well. He has a great disadvantage in that, as a child, he had a childhood illness which paralyzed part of his face and left him with very little hearing in one ear. So he cocks his head to the side and he talks out of one side of his mouth, which, as he says, is better than talking out of both, but it does leave an image of someone you might not trust.
Would you buy a used car from this man?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. How about some of the others, the 4 others?
Well, we have Mr. Roberts, who, when he came into politics, looked like a kind of chubby-cheeked little boy. And now, having lost about 12 pounds, I believe, it's now hanging in his face, unfortunately for him. He does not use his body particularly well. He has improved somewhat, and I assume that's because he's being coached. Mr. McGuigan, well, Mr. McGuigan, I wouldn't buy a used car from at all. I wouldn't even go onto his lot. Now, who will be left out?
John Monroe?
John Monroe is the only candidate who has a face that looks like somebody slept in and they're still there.
And Donald Johnson?
Donald Johnson, I'm sure, plays the piano very well. I'm sure he does, because he's a very boring speaker. I wish he wasn't, because I'm sure that somewhere there's a light under that bushel. Unfortunately, it's somewhat smothered.
It's not coming through.
No, it isn't, and he needs a haircut.
Mr. McNaughton, those are some very harsh words from a woman who makes it her business to study the images of people and how they are being received by the public. How realistic are those problems for you, somebody dealing with a candidate that you're trying to sell to the public?
Well, I think they're problems, but they're not very serious ones in the case of Don Johnson, because I think the challenge that we face is to get the private Don Johnson that I know known to the public, because in private he's witty, he's interesting, and he's a lot of fun. And I think no one challenges his intelligence or the ideas that he's putting across. And I think if we can get that human nature, the side that all of us who know him well know, then I think he'll come on very strong.
But how do you go about doing that?
Well, I think we're starting to get it across. I think part of it is that at the beginning of the campaign, not too many people knew him very well, partly because of the portfolios he'd held, and partly because of the fact he hasn't been in politics all that long. But I think slowly but surely, and certainly the last week is some evidence that he's starting to get a higher profile, and more people are starting to get to know him. And I think the more that happens, the better it'll be for Don Johnson.
But you have to promise to sell Petro-Can gas stations before anybody sits up and pays attention.
Well, that was one aspect of what he said. But I think it was inevitable that after focusing on personality for the first 3 weeks of the campaign, that the news media was going to start to turn to substance, to start asking the where's the beef question, and I think they've started to ask it, and they're starting to see Don Johnson as the most credible candidate in terms of the ideas he's putting forward.
All right, let's take a look at where's the beef in general, Pat Adams, because of course you make your business out of making sure that people have the right image, or at least are projecting the right image if they don't have the real stuff themselves. In a sense, aren't you playing into people's hands? Aren't you trivializing the kinds of decisions that people are making these days in the choice of a prime minister or a party leader by doing just that?
Oh, no, I don't believe that at all. I don't really care how brilliant a man Mr. Johnson, for instance, might be, unless he can convey to me and to the people of Canada that he has a statesman-like quality, that he has answers to questions, and that he can deliver them authoritatively, he will never be elected. Because just having good ideas is not enough in this world. You have to be able to put them in language that people understand, and with a passion that means that you care, and I don't see that.
But if you don't have that passion, if you don't happen to be the gregarious type of person, but you are in fact very bright and have some good ideas about where the country should be going, should that be the detriment that it has now become?
Well, whether it should or not, I think isn't really the point. It is, and it's a reality, and it's one that we all have to deal with. That I expect, and you expect, that if a man or woman wants to lead this country, that I'm going to be convinced that they are really concerned, that they are really caring, and they're really devoted to the ideas and the issues. And sadly enough, they also must be able to do it in 30-second responses.
David, do you agree?
Well, I think that's partially true. I think that the 30-second responses it's very difficult at the present moment when you're trying to put across new ideas and when we're facing challenges and opportunities in this country to describe what you're going to do about youth unemployment or about the social welfare system or any other ideas, how you can describe what you're going to do in 30 seconds. It's not easy. But I think that's why we have long leadership campaigns, because I think during the course of that, the leadership candidates will each have an opportunity to get their ideas out on the table. I think one comment I'd like to make, and that is, I think in the 60s and 70s there was a lot of hype about the way candidates looked and the so-called charisma of candidates. I think that what's changed a little bit in that is that people are much more looking at ideas, and what I would agree with Pat on is that I think it's important how you package your ideas in order to get them across, but people are much more looking to the vision that the candidates have of the country and the kind of ideas they're putting forward than simply their personalities, which I think was much more the case in the 60s and 70s.
Is that what you're saying, Pat Adams, that in fact that there has to be substance underneath there, they just have to be able to package and sell it right?
Absolutely, and I'd just like to say that you can, in fact, get across complex ideas in very brief time. Winston Churchill was a master of it, and he did it in very simplistic words.
What about the passion and emotion you've been talking about? If you don't have it, can you make people believe you do with proper training and backup from people like you?
Yes, but I'd rather they had it. It's a lot easier for me to tone someone down than to bring out of them a passion they don't have. You can only make of someone the best of what they are.
On the image front, who's the front runner?
Well, I like Chrétien personally, but I'm afraid Mr. Turner.
Even though it's cold and icy?
Unfortunately, yes.
Thank you both very much for joining us this morning. We've been talking with David McNaughton. He is a fundraiser strategist for the Donald Johnson campaign, and Pat Adams, president of consulting firm Tricom Communications. A look at image in politics. We'll be right back.